In Crestwood, a town wrapped in quiet charm, the Monroe family moved into an abandoned house on 11th Street. Yet on their very first night, their aging German Shepherd Carter kept his eyes fixed on the bathroom wall. Ears pricked claws tapping in a steady rhythm, as if urging out a secret long held in silence. From that moment the story began, when the stillness of the old house finally found its voice. Watch the full video to uncover what Carter awakened behind the plaster. The small town of Crestwood, Ohio, had a rhythm that seemed frozen in time. The air carried the scent of cut grass and worn timber. Old porches leaned forward as if listening to passing footsteps, and the single main street still held its ice cream parlor and second-hand shop. At dusk, the street lamps hummed, casting pools of light over cracked sidewalks. People waved at one another out of habit, and gossip traveled faster than the school bus. To newcomers, Crestwood felt like a town that had never been shaken awake. Thomas Monroe parked the moving truck in front of the beige ranch house on 11th Street. He and his wife Kara stood at the curb, staring at what they had just bought. They were both in their mid-30s, faces marked more by optimism than experience, and they believed they could turn an abandoned foreclosure into a home. The house was plain but tired. Its roof sagged, and the wood panels on the front porch had long since lost their paint. A vine had climbed up one side, wrapping itself around the gutter. The windows were cloudy, as if holding their breath for years. To Kara, it looked like a place waiting for a second chance. To Thomas, it looked like work. He pulled open the door, and a wave of stale air met them. Dust floated in the light that spilled across the worn carpet. Old wallpaper patterned with peaches and vines peeled at the corners. The house carried the smell of closed rooms, as if silence itself had settled into the walls. Carter trotted inside with slow steps. The German Shepherd was past his prime, his once dark coat now streaked with gray along his muzzle. His hips were stiff, and every rise from the floor took effort, yet his gaze remained sharp. He sniffed the air, his nose twitching as he explored the corners. Thomas set down a box and grinned. "See, he likes it already." Kara ran her hand along the banister. "Or he is making sure it belongs to us." They moved from room to room, pointing out what could be fixed, what could be kept. The kitchen held a worn linoleum floor that curled at the edges. The living room had wood paneling that darkened the space. But the fireplace in the corner promised warmth for winters. The bathroom, however, made Kara pause. A faint odor lingered there, sour and damp. She wrinkled her nose but said nothing. Thomas was already planning which walls to knock down, which paint colors to choose. By evening, boxes filled the hallway, and the Monroes sat on the porch steps, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The neighborhood was still. An old man across the street adjusted his porch swing, but kept his eyes on them longer than a greeting required. From somewhere down the block, a dog barked once, then silence returned. Kara leaned against Thomas's shoulder. "It feels strange here." "Strange good or strange bad?" he asked. She thought for a moment, like the house remembers something. Carter padded onto the porch and sat at their feet. His ears flicked at every distant sound. His eyes, though cloudy, stayed alert, scanning the quiet street. The town might have felt sleepy, but Carter did not rest easy. That night, as they prepared their bed in the living room, too tired to set up the bedroom upstairs, Kara noticed Carter lingering by the bathroom door. His body was still, his nose aimed at the tiled wall, and his paw pressed lightly to the floor. He stayed like that longer than she expected. Ears tilted forward, as if listening to something within the silence. Kara whispered, "Thomas, look at him." Thomas yawned. "He's just curious. New smells." Carter did not move. His tail rested flat, his eyes fixed on the wall. The Monroe house on 11th Street had been empty for years, but that night it felt less empty. The sound of Carter's claws tapping against the bathroom floor echoed faintly down the hallway, a rhythm steady and deliberate, hinting at something unseen. Morning light washed across 11th Street, pale and cold. Thomas dialed the local station, half embarrassed, as he explained about the smell in the bathroom and his dog's strange behavior. The dispatcher promised to send someone by. A few hours later, a dark sedan pulled into the driveway. The man who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair graying at the temples. His name tag read Hayes. To Thomas's surprise, Carter's ears lifted, and his tail flicked once, slow and certain, as though recognizing an old friend. William Hayes. The man introduced himself, shaking Thomas's hand. Your dog and I go back a long way. Kara blinked. You know Carter? William crouched, running a hand over Carter's thick fur. He and I worked together years ago. Afghanistan. Later on the narcotics task force. Best partner I ever had. His voice softened. I thought he retired for good. He's part of the family now, Thomas said. William nodded, but his eyes lingered on Carter, remembering. He could still see the dog straining against the desert wind, bitten to the ground, leading soldiers clear of an IED buried deep in clay. He could still recall the night raid in Cincinnati when Carter stopped cold before a hollow wall uncovering bricks stuffed with fentanyl. Time had slowed his steps, but not his instincts. Inside the house, the air grew heavier. William followed Kara down the hall to the bathroom. The narrow space was dim lit by a single bulb that hummed faintly. Shadows clung to the corners. The smell met him before the doorway. Damp, sour, aged. Carter entered first, his nails clicking against the tile. He stiffened, nose low, tail steady. William felt a ripple of unease crawl up his neck. He had seen Carter react like this only in the presence of danger, not mildew. Thomas gestured nervously. We thought it was pipes, or maybe mold. William said nothing. He stepped closer, hand brushing the cool tile, eyes narrowing. Carter pressed his paw against the baseboard again, tapping once, twice, the sound sharp against the silence. Memories pulled at William as he crouched beside him. Years earlier, in the dust of a Kandahar road, Carter had pawed just like this before a convoy. That small motion had saved 8 lives. Later, in a cinder-block warehouse, the same motion had uncovered a hidden stash that broke a trafficking ring. William whispered more to himself than anyone else. He's alerting. Kara glanced at him. To what? He kept his gaze on Carter. The dog's ears were forward, his body tense, every muscle drawn to that wall. William's chest tightened. Whatever it was, it had been waiting a long time. The bathroom light flickered again, casting a yellow wash over peeling wallpaper and cracked tile. The space felt smaller, as though the walls themselves leaned inward. Thomas cleared his throat. So what now? Do we open it? The question hung in the air unanswered. William stood slowly, eyes locked on the patch of wall above the tub. The smell seemed stronger, pressing in on them, and Carter's steady paw tapped again, a heartbeat against plaster. The bathroom fell silent, but for the faint hum of the bulb overhead. Carter shifted his weight, nose pressed hard against the plaster, and then he raked his claws down the wall. The sound was sharp, deliberate, echoing in the narrow room. His body trembled with focused tail, rigid ears pricked forward. Kara flinched at the noise. Thomas. Thomas rubbed his palms together, unease growing in his eyes. It has to be nothing. Yet his voice wavered. William knelt beside the tub, watching each motion. He had seen this posture too many times in the field. Shoulders tight, eyes locked, paw dragging across a surface with intent. It was no random habit. It was Carter's language, one William knew by heart. This isn't curiosity, William said quietly. He's telling us something's here. Carter scratched again, claws grinding against plaster. His breath came fast, chest rising and falling. Between each scrape, he paused, listening, as if expecting an answer from the wall itself. Kara hugged her arms around herself. What could be inside William didn't reply. He knew better than to guess. Years of service had taught him to trust the dog first. Questions later, Thomas paced the doorway, torn between disbelief and the heaviness in the room. We can't just rip into it. What if it's nothing but pipes? We'll ruin the place. Kara's voice was firm. What if it isn't? Carter pressed harder now, nails leaving faint grooves on the paint. A low whine escaped him, not loud but enough to tighten William's chest. He had heard that tone in deserts and alleys, the sound of danger buried out of sight. William rose to his feet. This is a signal, he said, his voice steady. He's alerting the same way he did overseas, the same way he did on every case we worked. I've never seen him wrong. The bulb flickered again, shadows shifting across the cracked tiles. The smell in the room thickened, sour and stale. It clung to their skin, a weight none of them could name. Thomas rubbed his face, caught between fear of damaging his new home and the growing dread curling inside his chest. If we break it open and find nothing, we look like fools. Kara met his gaze. And if we don't, we live with whatever that smell is, and with Carter staring at the wall every night. William placed a hand on the dog's back. Carter stood still for a moment, then clawed the plaster again, a sharp strike that sent flakes to the floor. His eyes never left the baseboard, his body taut like a wire. The room seemed to shrink around them, every breath heavy with tension. Thomas exhaled long and slow. So what do we do? No one answered. The sound of Carter's claws filled the silence once more, steady and insistent, as if each stroke was a demand, not a request. Thomas fetched a box cutter from his toolbox, his hand trembling slightly as he returned to the bathroom. Kara stood close behind him, her arms crossed tight against her chest. William stayed near the tub, eyes steady on Carter, who had pressed himself against the wall once more, waiting. The first slice cut into the old wallpaper. It peeled back in curling strips, revealing faded plaster beneath. The smell thickened instantly, sour and heavy, filling the small space like a warning. Kara gagged and covered her mouth with her sleeve. Thomas. He swallowed, jaw set. I smell it too. They worked together, pulling at the weak panels. Each section groaned as it came loose. Bits of plaster fell to the tiles, scattering white dust across the floor. With every piece removed, the stench grew stronger until it clung to their hair and clothes. Then William froze. Behind the insulation, something pale glimmered under the yellow light. Stop, he ordered. Kara leaned closer, her hand gripping Thomas's arm. The insulation was peeled back, and what lay behind it silenced them all. A rib cage collapsed, and Fragile pressed against the cavity as though trying to escape. A lock of dark brown hair clung to a corner of the tarp wrapped around the remains. Tattered denim faded almost gray, with time clung loosely to the bones. On one bony hand rested a necklace, the pendant still intact, though tarnished with age. William reached in carefully with gloved fingers and lifted it into the light. The chain was thin, the charm small and oval. Etched into the metal were two simple words, "Love, Mom." The room seemed to tilt. Kara stepped back against the sink, her breath shallow. Thomas lowered his head, unable to look. William's eyes locked on the pendant, his throat tight. He had seen death before, on battlefields, in alleys, in homes. But here in this quiet bathroom, it felt different. This was not war. This was someone forgotten, sealed away while the world moved on. Carter, who had been restless moments before, grew still. He lowered his head, ears tilted forward, eyes fixed on the space where the bones lay. His body no longer trembled with urgency. Instead, he stood like a sentinel guarding what had been found. William swallowed hard, sliding the pendant into an evidence bag. His voice was rough. She's been here a long time, Kara whispered. Who was she? The only sound that answered was the hum of the bulb and Carter's slow breathing. Thomas shut his eyes. This house was never empty, was it? No one replied. The truth hung in the air heavy as the smell that surrounded them. William touched Carter's head, grounding himself in the dog's steady presence. We'll find her name, he said quietly, and she will not be forgotten again. Carter blinked once still, as stone, his gaze unbroken. It was as though he understood. His job was not only to uncover, but also to stand guard until justice came. The bathroom was sealed that night, the doors shut tight with tape until officials could arrive. But William knew the wait would not give him peace. He drove back to the small police station in Crestwood, Carter riding quietly in the back seat. The dog's head rested against the window eyes, half closed, but his body remained alert with every sound that touched the night. Inside the station, William sat before a tired computer, the glow of the monitor washing over his face. The hum of the old machine mixed with the ticking clock on the wall. Files stretched back decades, most of them routine cases. Domestic disputes, missing wallets, noise complaints. Yet hidden within those pages was the name he was searching for. He typed through the archives, narrowing to disappearances. One by one, reports filled the screen. Some ended quickly. Runaways who came home, custody battles resolved false alarms. But then he saw it. Gloria Simmons, age 22, reported missing in February 1996. The file was thin, the details sparse. She had been working part-time at a grocery store and babysitting in the evenings. She lived with her boyfriend, had argued with him the night she vanished, and was never seen again. No witnesses, no trail. By the year 2000, the case was officially marked cold. William leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. 29 years. She had been sealed away while the town moved forward, her story reduced to a rumor. He printed the photo attached to the file. The image was grainy, the kind taken by a cheap camera at a family gathering. Gloria's dark eyes held both warmth and hesitation, her smile faint but real. William placed the photo on the desk beside the pendant, bagged in plastic. Together they told a story that demanded to be heard. Carter shifted on the floor beside him. William looked down at his old partner. You brought her back, he said softly. You made them see her again. The words lingered in the still air of the office. For nearly 3 decades, no one had spoken Gloria Simmons' name with purpose. Tonight it was spoken again. William flipped through the rest of the file. Notes scribbled by the original investigator hinted at suspicion toward the boyfriend, but nothing had been proven. Witnesses were vague, evidence thin. It was easier for the town to believe she had simply left. He tapped the desk with his finger, frustration tight in his chest. She didn't leave, he murmured. She never walked out of that door. The photograph of Gloria caught the lamplight. Her face seemed to watch him, patient and waiting. At sunrise, the Monroes arrived at the station. Kara sat across from William, pale and shaken. Did you find out who she was? William turned the photo toward her. Her name was Gloria Simmons. She was 22 when she disappeared in 1996. For 29 years, everyone thought she ran away. She never did. Kara covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Thomas stared at the picture in silence, his hand tightening around his knee. In that quiet room, the story shifted. Gloria was no longer a set of bones hidden behind plaster. She was a person again, with a name, a face, and a history. William placed the photo back on the file, his voice low. This isn't finished. If she was hidden in that wall, someone put her there. And someone wanted her forgotten. Carter raised his head, ears pricking as if he too was listening. News of the discovery spread across Crestwood faster than the morning paper. By noon, neighbors gathered along the sidewalk, whispering in low tones as police tape went up around the Monroe house. Some came out of curiosity, others out of guilt. Mrs. Kearns, who had lived 2 doors down for 40 years, shook her head. I told my husband back in '96 I heard something. A scream late at night. He said it was nothing, just the television. I should have pushed harder. Across the street, old Mr. Doyle leaned on his cane, his voice trembling. We all thought she ran. Young folks do that. No one wanted to stir trouble. But I remember, lights on in that bathroom window past midnight. And then gone. Their words hung heavy fragments of memory, piecing together a story no one dared to face at the time. For 29 years they had chosen silence. Now silence felt like guilt. William listened, notebook in hand. Each account painted the same picture neighbors had heard, had seen, but had convinced themselves it was nothing. And beneath that shared regret lay one name. Who owned the house back then? William asked. A man from the crowd answered. Jaden Hale, handyman type, kept to himself, tall, quiet. Moved here after the army, I think. Another voice added, mean streak, though. Folks said Gloria was with him. They fought a lot. William's pen froze. Jaden Hale. The name echoed through his thoughts. He pulled up property records later that afternoon. The paper trail was clear. Hale had bought the house in 1995, lived there until 2002, then sold it under rushed terms. No forwarding address, no bank account beyond that year. It was as if he had stepped off the map. Kara sat beside him at the station, arms folded tight. So Gloria was living with him when she disappeared. William nodded slowly. And he vanished a few years later. No job, no record, no trace. Thomas frowned. That feels deliberate. William leaned back in his chair, his jaw set. This isn't an accident. She didn't just end up behind that wall. Someone put her there. And if Hale went to such lengths to hide her, we may be looking at more than one crime. Carter stirred from his place by the door, stretching stiff legs before padding closer. He rested his head on William's knee, eyes steady, as if affirming what had already settled in William's mind. The station felt smaller shadows pooling in the corners as evening light faded. William tapped the folder of records against the desk. Hale left this town 23 years ago. But men like that don't just disappear. They carry their shadows with them. And if he hid one body, the question is, what else did he hide? The room fell silent. Outside Crestwood's main street dimmed under flickering lamps. Neighbors carried their whispers home, locking their doors, as if the past might still be alive and watching. William looked down at Carter, who had lifted his nose, sniffing the floorboards near the desk. His paw pressed against a seam in the wood, steady and sure. William exhaled. What did you find now? Old friend Carter's paw scraped once more at the seam in the wood. William pushed his chair back and crouched beside him. The old boards of the station floor creaked under his weight. He pressed his palm flat and knocked. A hollow thud answered. Thomas leaned forward. You hear that? William nodded. Help me move this desk. Together they shoved the heavy oak desk aside. Dust swirled into the air. Beneath the glow of a single lamp, William slid a thin blade between the boards and pried. The wood groaned before giving way. The smell of stale air rose from the cavity. Inside was a small wooden hatch, its edges worn smooth. Carter sniffed hard ears, tilted forward, tail stiff. William lifted the panel and reached in. His hand closed around something cold and metallic. He pulled out a tin box, its surface scratched and dented, rust creeping along the hinges. Kara clasped her hands. Open it! The latch resisted, but with a twist of his knife, William forced it free. The lid creaked open. Inside lay folded papers, a compact mirror cracked across the glass, and a leather-bound book no larger than his hand. The initials G.S. were pressed faintly into the cover. William lifted the book with care. The leather was brittle, the pages yellowed, but the writing inside was alive with Gloria's voice. The first entries carried a warmth that felt almost out of place. She wrote of starting work at the market, of saving for college, of meeting Jaden. "He seems gentle," one line read. "Maybe this one will be different. Maybe this time I can build something lasting." Kara whispered. She sounded hopeful. William turned the page. The tone shifted. The words grew tighter, the handwriting sharp. "He doesn't like me leaving the house. He watches me at work. He says I belong to him. I want to believe he cares, but his care feels like a cage." Another page, "I tried to go out with friends. He followed me. He said if I leave, he'll hurt himself. Or me. I don't know which frightens me more." William felt his throat tighten. He had read witness statements and reports, but this was different. This was her own hand, her own fear pressed into every stroke of ink. He turned to the last page. The words there were shaky, hurried. February 14th, 1996. "If I disappear, I did not run. I never would have run. I wanted a life. I wanted out. But I never left this house." The room went still. Thomas sat back hard in his chair. Kara's eyes brimmed with tears. Carter lowered his head onto his paws, silent as stone. William closed the journal with care, his hand trembling against the leather. "She tried to tell us. All this time she tried." Kara whispered, and no one listened. William placed the book back into the tin and sealed it. The evidence was no longer just bones and whispers. It was her voice carried across decades, demanding to be heard. He looked at Carter, whose gaze had not left him. "You were right again," he said softly. "You always are." The night outside pressed against the station windows, heavy and dark. William knew the path forward had changed. They were no longer searching for a name. They were following a confession carved into paper, pointing straight at the man who had once called himself her protector. The journal left little room for doubt. Gloria had not run. She had been trapped, silenced, and hidden. And the name written between the lines of her fear was Jaden Hale. William knew he needed more than a journal to push the case forward. He needed someone who had lived beside Jaden, someone who might have seen what others chose to ignore. The records showed that Jaden had once been married. His wife, Elizabeth Hale, had divorced him in 2001, a year before he sold the house and vanished. She was still living 2 towns over in a small apartment complex. By late afternoon, William stood outside her door. Carter sat at his side, patient, watchful, his graying coat catching the pale light of the hallway. William knocked gently. The door opened just enough for a tired face to appear. Elizabeth Hale's hair was pulled back, streaked with gray, though she could not have been much past 60. Her eyes flicked from William's badge to Carter, then back to his steady gaze. "I'm not in trouble, am I?" she asked quietly. "No, ma'am," William said. "But I need to talk to you about your ex-husband, about Jaden." Her knuckles whitened on the edge of the door. For a moment he thought she would close it, but instead she stepped aside. The apartment was sparse, filled with secondhand furniture and the faint smell of tea. They sat at a small table by the window. Carter lay at William's feet, head resting on his paws, eyes never leaving Elizabeth. William placed the journal on the table, not opening it, only setting it down as a weight between them. "We found Gloria Simmons in the house on 11th Street. She never left. She was sealed behind a wall." Elizabeth's breath caught. She covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. Tears filled before she spoke. "I thought... He told me she ran off." "That's what he said?" William leaned forward, his voice calm, Did you ever see anything that made you doubt him?" Her hands trembled. She stared at the table as though it might swallow her. That night, she whispered. The night she went missing. He came home late, clothes dirty, mud up to his knees. I asked where he'd been. He told me if I said another word, I'd end up the same. His eyes. I had never seen him like that. William let her sit in the silence that followed. Tears slipped down her cheeks, falling onto the worn wood of the table. I wanted to tell someone, she said, her voice breaking. But he kept me trapped, too. He said nobody would believe me, that everyone already thought she left. And maybe I wanted to believe it myself, because the truth was too awful. Her shoulders shook. She pressed her hands to her face, sobbing into her palms. William's chest tightened. He had heard confessions before, but few carried the weight of 3 decades. "You're telling me you saw him come back that night, covered in dirt, and he threatened you?" She nodded. "Yes. And I never forgot it." The room felt heavy, every word carving another layer into the story Gloria had begun. This was no longer only her journal or her bones. Now there was testimony, living proof of Jaden's hand in her death. Elizabeth wiped her eyes, her voice soft. "If you're going after him, you won't be alone. I've carried this for too long." William reached down and scratched Carter's ear. The dog stirred as if acknowledging the shift in the air. A new path had opened. The next morning, the Monroe house on 11th Street was crowded with uniforms. Yellow tape circled the yard, and a forensic team moved carefully through the property. Neighbors watched from their porches, whispering as shovels and scanners combed the soil. William stood near the back steps, Carter at his side. The old dog sniffed the air, slow but deliberate, his paws dragging across the patchy grass. He stopped near the corner of the garden, ears tilting forward, and pressed his paw against a plank laid flat along the ground. William crouched. "What do you smell?" Carter tapped again, claws clicking against the wood. The sound was hollow, unnatural. William motioned to the team. "Here, pull this up." 2 officers pried at the plank until it lifted free, revealing loose earth beneath. The soil was damp, darker than the ground around it, as though it had been disturbed many times before. A shovel sank in, and within minutes, 1 officer struck metal. Carefully, they cleared the dirt until a rusted tin box emerged, its lid sealed tight, but edges brittle. William knelt, brushing away the soil with his gloved hand. "Open it slow," he instructed. The hinges groaned as the lid was forced back. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. When they unrolled it, the contents spilled across the tarp. Faded photographs of young women, some smiling, some blurred. A compact mirror with initials scratched into the back. A set of earrings. A hairbrush with broken teeth. Personal items. Each once carried close, now discarded as tokens in the dirt. Kara, standing nearby, gasped. "Those aren't all Gloria's." William studied the faces in the photos. Different women, different years. None matched the image of Gloria in the case file. He felt a chill work its way up his spine. Thomas whispered, "What is this?" William's voice was low. "It's a collection." He kept pieces of them. The weight of the discovery pressed on everyone present. It was no longer the story of one woman sealed behind a wall. It was the trail of someone who had hunted more than once. One officer handed William a small necklace tangled in the pile. The charm was a silver heart tarnished with age initials, engraved faintly along the side. William turned it in his hand, then looked at Carter. The German shepherd's gaze was fixed on the open box, body tense, but still. He was silent now, his job done. He had found what needed to be found. William stood facing the team. "We're no longer looking at a single homicide. This man kept trophies. That makes him something else entirely." Kara's voice cracked. A monster? The word hung in the air, grim and final. William placed the items back in the box and sealed it. His chest tightened with the weight of certainty. Jaden Hale had not simply hidden Gloria. He had hidden others too, their lives reduced to objects buried in his yard. The quiet town of Crestwood shifted under the truth. A forgotten case had become the door to something far darker. A pattern that stretched beyond one house, beyond one woman, beyond one town. William stroked Carter's back. You've led us to more than we imagined. Now we follow where it goes. The officers carried the box to the evidence van. Neighbors stepped back, their whispers rising like a tide. Some shook their heads, others crossed themselves, all realizing the shadows of 11th Street were deeper than anyone had believed. William looked south, his jaw set. Somewhere Jaden Hale was still alive, still moving. And now the hunt was no longer for answers, but for a predator who had walked free for decades. Carter shifted beside him, tail low, but steady nose pointed toward the horizon. The discovery in the Monroe yard sent ripples far beyond Crestwood. News outlets called it a breakthrough in a decades-old cold case. But William knew it was more than that. Gloria's story had cracked open the surface, revealing something far darker. Now the search for Jaden Hale had become a hunt for a predator who had slipped through cracks for years. 2 days later, a call came through the Crestwood station. A man in Mississippi reported a mechanic who went by the name Ray Dean. He claimed the stranger had settled quietly in a small town outside Meridian, running a modest tire shop. The description was precise. Tall, heavy-set, with a shoulder that sloped unevenly, an old injury he tried to hide. William sat at the desk with the phone pressed to his ear, his jaw tight. When the caller finished, William asked only one question. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," the voice said. "I worked under him for a year. The picture you showed on the news. That's him, just older. He keeps to himself, pays in cash. Folks call him Ray, but I knew something was off." The line went dead, but the lead was alive. By dawn, William had briefed federal agents. The FBI agreed to join the hunt, sending a task force south. Files were packed, evidence secured, and within hours, William was on a plane with Carter at his side. The German Shepherd shifted uneasily under the cabin lights, his cloudy eyes steady as he rested against William's boots. Long road ahead, William murmured, rubbing his partner's ear. "But you've carried us this far." When the plane touched down in Mississippi, the air hit thick and heavy, carrying the scent of oil and damp earth. The agents led them through a briefing at the local field office. Maps of Meridian and surrounding towns covered the walls. A red circle marked the outskirts where the tire shop sat between a stretch of junk yards and a line of shuttered stores. "This Ray Dean hasn't filed taxes, no driver's license, no digital trail," an agent explained. "But the property deed is in his name. Bought in cash. If this is Hale, he's been careful, but not invisible." William nodded. Careful men still leave shadows. Carter can find them. That night in the motel room, William sat on the edge of the bed with the journal of Gloria Simmons in his hands. The last line echoed in his mind. "If I disappear, I did not run." He looked down at Carter, stretched across the floor, his breathing deep but restless. "You brought her back," William whispered. "Now we bring him in." Carter lifted his head, one ear twitching at the sound of his voice. Even with age in his bones, the fire in his eyes remained. At dawn, the convoy set out. Black SUVs rolled past fields of rusting cars and broken fences. The town outside Meridian stirred slowly, its streets quiet under the weight of summer heat. Ahead, the cinder block building came into view. Dean's tires painted in faded red across the front. Old pickups littered the lot, stacked tires rising in towers like dark sentinels. William tightened his vest, checked his radio, and glanced at Carter. "This is it, partner. Stay close." The agents spread out, securing exits, weapons ready. The air grew tense, thick with anticipation. William's heart beat steady, focused. Somewhere inside the man they had chased across states might still be breathing, still believing he had outrun the past. Carter stood at William's side, nose lifted, ears alert. His gaze fixed on the shop door, body rigid with purpose. William exhaled, once low and even. "Let's bring the shadow into the light." The raid unfolded in silence, broken only by the creak of hinges and the shuffle of boots over gravel. Agents fanned out, rifles raised, while William and Carter moved through the center of the lot. The shop's wide doors screeched as it rolled up, revealing shadows that swallowed the pale morning light. Inside, the air was thick with oil and burnt rubber. Tools lay scattered across benches, grease pooled on the floor, and old tires lined the walls like towers of black stone. The silence felt staged, as if the room had been waiting for them. "Clear left," an agent called. "Clear right," another echoed. William advanced through the gloom, Carter padding at his side. The dog's nose twitched, his body tight, every step deliberate. They moved past an office with papers tossed across the desk, past a break room with dishes still in the sink. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry. "Contact," one of the agents asked. "Nothing," William replied. "He's gone." The words carried no relief. They all knew absence could speak louder than presence. Then Carter stiffened. He stopped near a stack of tires in the back corner, nose pressed to the ground. His body lowered, tail stiff, and he scratched at the concrete. William crouched beside him, pressing a hand to the floor. A hollow sound answered the tap of his knuckles. "Here," William said. "There's something beneath." The agents cleared the area, prying at the slab, until a hidden panel lifted free. Beneath it lay a narrow pit, dark and shallow. William lowered a flashlight. The beam caught cloth, frayed and stained. He reached in with gloved hands and pulled out the first piece. A blouse once white, now marred with deep brown patches. Another garment followed, torn denim with darker stains. Then came necklaces, each tucked inside as though arranged on purpose. One was a simple chain with a tiny locket. Another bore a small charm with the letter M etched into the metal. A third, heavier and rusted, carried initials almost lost to time. Kara, who had insisted on coming despite William's hesitation, pressed her hand to her mouth. They belonged to different women. William set the pieces gently onto a tarp. The pit was not large, but it carried the weight of multiple lives. These were trophies, remnants of people who had once walked, spoken, laughed. Jaden kept them. William set his voice hard. Not just Gloria, others too. The agents stood in silence, the hum of the shop's old lights filling the room. Each item pulled from the pit made the truth clearer. Jaden Hale had not acted once. He had repeated again and again, burying his crimes under layers of concrete and time. Carter sat at the edge of the pit, eyes fixed downward, his body still as if guarding the evidence. William rested a hand on his partner's back. "You found their voices," he murmured. "We'll make sure they're heard." An agent closed the evidence bags, sealing the items with care. Outside, the sun was rising higher, but inside the shop, it remained dim, the air heavy with unspoken truths. William looked at the open pit one last time before stepping back. He didn't stop at one. He never does. And he's still out there. Carter rose, nose to the air, as if already tracing the scent of the next secret. The evidence from the repair shop shifted the case from suspicion to certainty. Jaden Hale was not a man with a single crime in his past. He was a predator who had hunted for years. Yet even as the agents cataloged each item, Carter paced near the exit, restless nose lifted toward the wind. William noticed. "You've got something else, don't you?" That evening, Carter pulled them away from the concrete and oil of the shop and toward the outskirts of town. The pine forest stretched wide and silent, its needles carpeting the ground in muted green. The air smelled of sap and damp earth, but Carter moved with purpose, weaving between trunks, his stride steady, despite the stiffness in his legs. William followed close flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Agents trailed behind, quiet, letting the dog lead. The deeper they went, the heavier the forest seemed to grow shadows, thickening under the tall pines. Carter stopped suddenly in a clearing. He lowered his nose to the ground, sniffed hard, and pawed once at the soil. His tail stiffened. William knelt, pressing the earth with his hand. It was soft. Too soft for untouched ground. "Mark this," he ordered. Shovels struck the earth. The first few inches gave easily, the soil damp and loose. Within minutes, the smell rose. A sickly old rot carried through the roots. An officer stepped back, face pale. The flashlight beam caught bone. They cleared the soil carefully. The first grave revealed the remains of a woman, her frame curled as though she had been forced small. Around her neck hung a necklace with a tiny star-shaped charm. Kara turned away, tears in her eyes. William stayed still, his chest heavy, while Carter sat at the edge of the pit, gaze fixed downward, silent as stone. Before anyone could speak, Carter moved again, nose twitching as he walked 10 paces into the trees. He scratched at another patch of earth, his claws raking at pine needles until dirt showed. The second dig began. This one was deeper, the soil compact. But when the shovels struck wood, a hush fell. They uncovered a crude box hastily built from planks. Inside lay another body, smaller than the first, with strands of dark hair still clinging to the skull. Around her neck was a delicate chain with a single pearl. An agent whispered, "He buried them here," like they were nothing. But they were not nothing. Each necklace told its own story, each charm a piece of a life erased. William stood over the graves, his fists clenched. He kept their faces in photos, their belongings in boxes, and their bodies in the ground. He wanted them forgotten, but Carter won't let that happen. The clearing was silent, except for the rustle of trees above. The air felt heavy, as though the forest itself carried the weight of secrets finally unearthed. By dawn, the remains were prepared for transport, carefully lifted from the soil and placed into waiting vehicles. The town coroner would try to put names to bones, but William knew the families, whoever they were, had lived years with unanswered questions. Now those questions would reopen wounds, thought long healed. Back at the edge of the woods, reporters gathered their cameras, flashing voices sharp with urgency. News spread fast. Crestwood was no longer a forgotten town with a single tragedy. It was now tied to multiple graves, each linked by the shadow of Jaden Hale. William placed a hand on Carter's back as they emerged from the forest. The German shepherd's ears were forward, his eyes steady. "You've given them a voice," William murmured. "But this is only the beginning." By the time the sun rose over Crestwood the next morning, the story had left the borders of Ohio. Headlines lit up screens across the country. Cold case explodes into multi-state probe. Television anchors repeated the same words. Hidden graves, forgotten victims, one dog uncovering them all. In New York, morning news tickers ran Carter's name beside the images of investigators pulling evidence from the Monroe house. In Los Angeles, talk shows debated how a small-town case could expose a predator who had walked free for decades. By afternoon, the FBI announced an official multi-state task force. William watched the coverage from the back of a conference room. Reporters replayed the same clip again and again. Carter, his gray fur ruffled, standing still beside the first grave in the pine forest. Beneath the photo, a caption read, The Dog Who Woke Justice. The title stuck. Carter was no longer just William's partner or a retired K-9. To the public, he had become a symbol of persistence, a reminder that silence could be broken, even after decades. Agents filled the room with chatter maps spread across tables' pins, marking states where Jaden Hale might have traveled. William tried to focus, but his chest grew tight with the weight of it all. Every interview request, every flashing headline, every whisper of serial killer made the hunt feel heavier. That night in the motel, William sat with his head in his hands. Papers covered the bed photographs of victims both named and unknown. Scattered like a mosaic of grief, he felt the burden of every family waiting for answers, every town bracing for the possibility of more graves. "You're the face of this now," an FBI agent had told him earlier. "You and the dog." William wasn't sure he wanted that role. He had sworn to seek justice, not attention. But the world demanded both. He glanced down. Carter lay stretched out on the rug, his breathing steady eyes half-lidded but alert. Even in rest, his ears twitched with every sound outside. The old dog bore no weight of fame, no fear of headlines. He knew only the work, the scent, the call to uncover what others missed. William leaned over and stroked the dog's head. "They call you a hero now," he whispered. "And you don't even know it." Carter's tail gave a slow thump against the floor, his eyes meeting William's with quiet steadiness. For a moment, the weight lifted. The man carried pressure, but the dog, Gus, carried only purpose. By dawn, they were on the road again, driving south through wetlands and pine groves. The case was no longer a Crestwood tragedy. It was a national hunt stretching from Ohio to Mississippi, from Louisiana to wherever Jaden Hale still walked. As the SUV rolled on, William tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "This isn't just about finding him anymore," he said aloud, voice low. "It's about stopping him before another name gets added to that list." Beside him, Carter sat upright, nose to the window, eyes fixed on the horizon. The weight of headlines, the noise of media, none of it touched him. He was ready, steady, and unshaken. William drew strength from that calm. Whatever pressure pressed in Carter's persistence cut through it like a line of light. The wetlands of Louisiana stretched like a maze of water and shadow. Spanish moss draped from the cypress trees, and the air clung heavy with the scent of mud. The task force spread wide through the swamp boats, gliding across dark channels, radios crackling with clipped voices. William steered his skiff along a narrow path, Carter at the bow. The old German shepherd stood steady despite the rocking boat nose lifted, sniffing the damp wind. His ears twitched once, then again. William recognized the shift. Carter had caught something. The dog barked once, sharp and insistent, before leaning toward the bank. William guided the boat in, pushing through reeds until the bow scraped against mud. Carter leapt down, his paws sinking, but he moved without hesitation. William followed, boots heavy with water flashlight cutting through the tangle of brush. Then he saw it. A shack hidden deep in the trees, its boards warped with age. Roof sagging, door chained shut. Carter pressed his nose to the gap beneath the door and whined low, pawing at the wood. William's chest tightened. He motioned for the agents behind him. "Cut it open." Bolt cutters snapped the chain. The door groaned as it swung inward. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and fear. On the floor, curled against a thin blanket, was a girl no older than 14. Her wrists bore raw marks from rope, her hair tangled, her face pale with exhaustion. "Savannah Lee," one agent breathed. "She's the one who vanished 2 weeks ago." Her eyes fluttered open at the sound. For a heartbeat, she recoiled, fear etched deep. Then Carter stepped forward, tail low, ears relaxed. He nuzzled her arm gently, pressing warmth into her cold skin. Savannah blinked, then reached for his fur with trembling fingers. William knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said, voice steady. "We're here." Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips moved, a whisper escaping. He said, "No one would find me." William shook his head. He was wrong. "Carter found you." The girl clung to the dog's neck, burying her face in his fur. Carter stayed still, steady as a shield. His eyes locked on William, as if to say the mission was done. Medics rushed forward, wrapping Savannah in blankets, checking her pulse, slipping water to her lips. She was weak, but alive. Against the silence of the swamp, her breathing felt like the sound of victory. As she was carried out to the waiting boat, she reached back for Carter. The old shepherd padded alongside, refusing to leave her side, until she was settled safely. William exhaled tension, draining from his shoulders. For weeks, they had uncovered only bones and tokens of the dead. Now, finally, there was life. A survivor. A voice that could testify to what Jaden Hale had done. He looked at Carter, who stood watch over the girl as though guarding something sacred. "You've given us a witness," William whispered. "Now we finish this." The swamp around them seemed to breathe shadows, shifting as the hunt pressed on. Jaden Hale was still out there, moving deeper into the wilderness, but now the balance had shifted. For the first time in decades, one of his victims had lived. The rescue of Savannah Lee lit a fire under the task force. The girl's testimony would be enough to prove Jaden Hale was alive and still hunting. But it also meant he was desperate. Men like him did not vanish quietly. They lashed out, fought to keep their shadows intact. By dawn the next morning, reports came in from locals. A fisherman claimed he had seen a man moving through the marsh on foot, carrying supplies in a sack. Another swore his boat had been stolen during the night. The pattern was clear. Jaden was slipping deeper into the Louisiana swamps, using the labyrinth of water and reeds as his shield. William stood on the dock as the agents loaded equipment into flat-bottom boats. Carter sat at his side, ear-sharp eyes locked on the horizon. Though his hips ached and his pace had slowed with age, the dog's focus had not dimmed. Once more, partner William murmured, resting a hand on his back. The flotilla of boats fanned out into the basin. The water was dark, swallowing reflections of the sky. Cypress knees jutted upward like jagged teeth, and the hum of cicadas filled the thick air. Radios crackled with short reports. No contact, no movement, all clear. William kept his eyes on Carter. The German shepherd sniffed the wind, then leaned toward the right tail, stiff. William steered the skiff in that direction. Minutes later, Carter barked once sharp and certain, then lowered his nose to the floorboards of the boat, tracing an invisible line. William followed his lead into a narrow channel, branches scraping against his shoulders as the boat pushed forward. "Unit 3, follow my position," William called into the radio. "Carter's on something." The channel widened into a small clearing of water where reeds grew tall. There, half submerged in the mud, lay a flat-bottomed boat, its oars discarded. "He's on foot now," an agent said grimly. Carter jumped ashore, nose pressed to the ground. His paws sank into the mud, but he pressed on, leading them into the dense brush. William followed close, his heart hammering. Broken branches, fresh footprints, the faint stench of sweat mixed with swamp water. It all pointed forward. The dog moved with certainty, his body low, his breath short but steady. Every few steps he paused, listening, then pressed on again. The deeper they went, the quieter the swamp seemed to grow, as though the forest itself held its breath. Then came a sound. Faint splashes ahead, the rustle of reeds parting under hurried steps. "He's close," William whispered. The team spread out rifles, ready boots sinking into the muck. Carter growled, low eyes locked on the trail ahead. His ears flicked once, then his body surged forward, pulling William along. Through the veil of moss, William caught a glimpse of movement. a figure scrambling across a fallen log's shoulders, hunched clothes drenched in sweat. Jaden Hale. Contact visual, an agent shouted. The swamp erupted. Boats shifted, radios barked orders, agents cut off escape routes. But Jaden pushed deeper, vanishing into the brush, driven by fear. William kept pace, Carter pulling him toward the sound of breaking branches. The hunt was no longer an investigation. It was a chase through water and shadow man and dog against a predator clinging to his last freedom. William's breath came hard, his boots heavy with mud, but Carter pressed on, nose sharp, body certain. The old shepherd refused to quit. "Stay with him," William urged. "We finish this together." The swamp swallowed their voices, leaving only the pounding rhythm of pursuit. Ahead, somewhere in the tangle of reeds and water, Jaden Hale was running out of ground. The swamp tightened around them, reeds clawing at their arms, water pulling at their legs. William pushed forward, Carter straining at the lead growl low in his throat. Then the brush parted, revealing a clearing where the trees bent inward like walls. Jaden Hale stood at the center. His chest heaved, sweat dripping from his face. His clothes were soaked, streaked with mud, his eyes darting wildly for a path that no longer existed. Agents circled at a distance, their rifles steady. But it was William and Carter who stepped into the space between. "Jaden Hale." William called, his voice cutting through the still air. "It's over." Jaden shook his head, his hands trembling though empty. "You've got the wrong man," he rasped. "I didn't do any of this." William's eyes narrowed. "We found Gloria. We found the others. We found Savannah. Your lies don't stand anymore." Jaden's chest tightened, but he forced a smile, jagged and thin. "Savannah's just a runaway. You can't prove." The growl silenced him. Carter stepped forward, his body taut, eyes burning through the years of shadow. He held no weapon, no words, only the weight of truth. His stare locked on Jaden, unbroken, unyielding. Jaden faltered. His knees bent slightly, his breath stuttered. For the first time, the predator looked hunted. William saw it. The crack in the man's defiance. He spoke low, steady. "Every woman you buried, every family you broke, he remembers. And now you answer for it." Jaden's gaze flicked from William to Carter and back again. His lips trembled. "That dog, he's just an animal." But Carter's stare did not waver. His presence was heavier than the rifles, aimed more final than any badge. The silence stretched thick and unbreakable, until Jaden's voice broke under it. I didn't..." He stammered, then snapped, his fear spilling over. He turned, trying to bolt through the trees. "Move!" William shouted. Agents surged forward. One tackled Jaden hard into the mud cuffs, snapping onto his wrists. He kicked once, twice, but his strength was gone. The fight drained from him, leaving only the stench of sweat and fear. Carter stood over him, growl low, but controlled his eyes, never leaving the man who had hidden behind walls and graves. Jaden turned his face away, unable to meet the stare any longer. William stepped closer, mud clinging to his boots. "You ran for 30 years. You don't run anymore." Jaden spat weakly at the ground, but his voice carried no power. "You think locking me away changes anything? They're still gone." William's jaw clenched. He looked at Carter, then back at Jaden. "They're not gone. They live in every step he's taken to bring you here. And now they'll be heard." The agents dragged Jaden to his feet, shackled and defeated. His shoulders sagged, his head low. For once, the silence of the swamp was not his ally. William knelt beside Carter, running a hand along the dog's back. "You did it," he whispered. "You carried us to the end." Carter leaned gently against him, his eyes calm. The hunt was over. The courthouse was packed from the first day of the trial. Reporters lined the steps outside, cameras flashing as Jaden Hale was led in, shackled, his face pale, his eyes hollow. For years he had hidden in silence. Now every secret he had buried was dragged into the light. Inside, the courtroom was heavy with tension. Families of missing women filled the benches, clutching photographs worn soft from decades of searching. Some sat in silence, others wept quietly, their grief sharpened by the truth that had finally come. William sat near the front, arms resting on the floor beside him. Though retired, the old dog wore his vest, its faded patches a quiet reminder of the years he had given. His head stayed low, but his ears twitched at every sound. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece, the bones behind the bathroom wall, the journals, the photographs, the trophies found beneath the tire shop. Each item was placed before the jury like a stone in a grave, building a weight too heavy for denial. But it was Savannah Lee who broke the silence. The 14-year-old stepped hesitantly to the stand, her small frame wrapped in a pale cardigan. The courtroom stilled as she lifted her eyes toward the jury. Her voice shook, but it carried. "He took me. He locked me in a shack. He said no one would find me. He said I would disappear like the others." She swallowed hard, clutching the edge of the stand. "But Carter found me. If he hadn't, I wouldn't be here." William felt his throat tighten. Even Carter lifted his head, ears pricked as though he understood the weight of her words. Savannah's testimony stretched on each sentence, heavier than the last. She spoke of nights in darkness, of fear that clawed at her, of the moment hope flickered back when she saw a German shepherd's face in the doorway. By the time she finished, half the courtroom was in tears. The defense tried to twist, to suggest confusion, to claim mistaken identity. But every argument crumbled beneath the evidence and the living witness who sat brave before them. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty on all counts. Kidnapping, murder, assault. The sentence, life without parole. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber, final and sharp. Jaden Hale sagged in his chair, the fight gone from his body. He was led away in silence, the shadows he had carried for nearly 30 years stripped from him by the light of truth. Outside, Crestwood breathed for the first time in decades. Families who had lived with unanswered questions now stood together in grief, but also in release. The town that had carried a wound for so long felt the weight lift, even if scars remained. Reporters crowded William on the steps. They asked about the case, about the evidence, about the trial. But when they asked about Carter, Williams' answer was simple. He was the one who listened when no one else did. Every life brought back to light. He led us there. Carter stood beside him, calm and steady, as the crowd applauded. His ears flicked at the sound, but his gaze stayed fixed forward, as if he already knew the work was done. The steps of the National Mall shimmered under the spring sun. Flags stirred in the light breeze, and rows of officers in dress uniforms filled the lawn. Families, survivors, veterans, and children gathered in silence, waiting for a ceremony unlike any other. At the center stood William, his posture sharp in his pressed uniform. Beside him, Carter was wheeled forward on a padded cart draped with the American flag. Age had bent the German shepherd's frame, and arthritis slowed his steps, but his eyes still held their steady fire. The crowd rose as one applause, breaking like thunder across the lawn. The announcer's voice carried over the speakers. "Today, we honor a partner who gave his life's strength to justice. A K-9 whose instincts uncovered truth buried in silence, and whose loyalty carried families back to the light. Today we honor Carter." The audience erupted in cheers. Children waved small flags, survivors held photographs of loved ones, and veterans saluted with tears in their eyes. William stepped forward, the medal gleaming in his hand. His voice was steady, though his throat ached with emotion. "This dog has walked with me through war and peace, through alleys and swamps, through silence that held secrets too long. He listened when no one else did. And because of him, names were remembered, families were healed, and justice was found. He knelt beside the cart and fastened the silver star to Carter's vest. The old dog's ears twitched at the sound of applause, his tail brushing once against the cart. A little girl stepped from the crowd, Savannah Lee. She held a bouquet of white lilies in trembling hands. Walking to the front, she placed them gently beside Carter and whispered, "Thank you." The shepherd turned his head toward her eyes, soft as though he recognized the life he had saved. The applause swelled, echoing against the marble monuments. Veterans saluted. Parents held their children closer. Reporters captured the image, a graying shepherd resting but proud, receiving the honor of a nation. William stood tall beside his partner, his hand resting on Carter's shoulder. For years they had walked side by side in silence, their bond forged in trust and tested in darkness. Now, as the crowd roared, William whispered low enough for only Carter to hear, "You carried us here. This is your day." As the ceremony closed, the cart was wheeled gently down the steps. Carter's body was frail, but his ears remained high, listening to every clap, every cheer, every heartbeat of gratitude around him. He did not need words. The sound of the crowd was enough. The applause followed them long after they left the stage, the echo of a nation that had found its hero in an old dog who never stopped listening. Spring in Crestwood came softly that year. The riverbanks bloomed with wildflowers, and the water ran calm beneath the bridge where children once fished in silence. It was here, beneath the shade of an old oak by the water's edge, that William held Carter for the last time. The old shepherd lay in his arms, wrapped in a worn flannel blanket. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes, though cloudy, still held that same unwavering steadiness William had trusted for years. "You don't have to fight anymore," William whispered. "You've already given more than anyone could ask." Carter's tail thumped once, faint but sure. Then his eyes closed slowly, his body heavy with rest. In that moment there was no pain, no chase, no shadows, only peace. William buried him by the river where the evening light lingered on the water. A small stone was placed at the head of the grave. It bore only one word: Carter. To the town, he was a hero. To William, he was family. Days later, Savannah Lee returned to Crestwood. Now stronger, her cheeks fuller, her voice steady, she carried a folded letter. She placed it at the base of Carter's stone, weighting it with a smooth river rock. In it she had written, "Dear Carter, you didn't know me, but you saved me. When I was too scared to scream, you heard me. When no one saw me, you did. Because of you, I am alive. I promise I'll live in a way that honors what you gave me. I'll be somebody, and I'll carry your name in my heart. Always. Love, Savannah." William read the letter twice before tucking it gently into a small box of keepsakes. His chest ached, but the ache was lined with gratitude. Carter had not just uncovered graves. He had restored life, hope, and the belief that silence could be broken. The story of the dog spread far beyond Crestwood. Families of the lost came to the river, leaving flowers and tokens at the grave. Lawmakers in Washington spoke his name on the floor of Congress. Within months, a new bill passed with overwhelming support, Carter's Law. It required every cold case with credible K-9 alerts to be reopened, no matter how much time had passed. It was more than policy. It was protection, a promise that no voice uncovered by loyalty would ever be ignored again. At the signing, the president held up the bill and said simply, "This began with a dog who listened." Back in Crestwood, William sat by the river, often the sound of water carrying through the air. Sometimes Savannah joined him, sketchbook in hand, drawing the dog who had pulled her back into life. Sometimes families of other victims came bringing stories, tears, and laughter. The oak tree swayed, the stone stood firm, and the river carried all their memories forward. William would whisper when no one else was there, "You're still with us, partner." you always will be. And perhaps in the hush of the river and the rustle of the leaves, there was an answer. Not in bark or whine, but in presence. Because Carter had never listened to sound alone. He listened to the truth inside silence. Carter's story reminds us that heroes do not always wear uniforms or carry medals. Sometimes they walk on four legs, their loyalty quiet, yet unbreakable. His life was more than a series of investigations and discoveries. It was a testament to what compassion, trust, and persistence can achieve. Through him, forgotten voices were heard, truth was uncovered, and lives were saved. German shepherds like Carter are known around the world for their intelligence, courage, and devotion. But beyond their strength in service, they embody something deeper, unconditional love. They guard not only our homes, but also our hearts, offering comfort in silence and courage in moments of fear. Carter's journey showed us that when we truly listen to animals, we discover more than instinct. We uncover their ability to guide us toward justice, kindness, and hope. For Crestwood, his work closed a painful chapter that had lasted nearly 3 decades. For Savannah, he gave back a life that was almost stolen. And for all of us, he left behind a legacy that extends beyond laws and ceremonies, the call to treat every living being with dignity and care. Carter's law may now ensure that no K9's alert is ignored again. But his greater law is written in the bond between people and animals. It asks us to value loyalty, to honor sacrifice, and to carry forward the lessons of compassion. When we care for animals, we do more than protect them. We invite their wisdom into our lives. Carter listened when others did not, and in that listening, he changed the world. May his story inspire us to love more deeply, to act more kindly, and to believe in the silent strength that often speaks the loudest.